two, one, two, three.
Hello and welcome to Ithaca DSA Presents. I'm Theresa Alt. I'm here today with Jorge DeFendini. He is my alderperson here in the 4th Ward. That's College Town. He has been an alderperson now for a whole year. And we are recording this shortly after the first Common Council meeting of 2023. Jorge, what are the biggest things that happened on council last year?
A lot has happened last year. I think it's safe to say that there was something eventful and of note just about every month last year. And I'm hoping for, while a more productive, a somewhat more calm year this coming 2023. Yeah, like a lot of big stories happened last year, kicking off with Mayor Myrick's resignation, his announcement at the beginning of the year, followed by the sort of interim acting mayor taken up by the current mayor, Laura Lewis. And a lot did transpire, conversations and controversies regarding the reimagining public safety process. The city took on a working group to discuss the homeless encampments throughout the city, of which I was made a part of. There were a number of controversies regarding the city's labor, with many public workers coming out bravely speaking against poor negotiations and strained relationships between city negotiators, such as Ari Levine, and the city unions who are bargaining. Our acting chief has still to be replaced with a permanent chief. And I think
you mean police chief, right?
That's right, yes. For the Ithaca Police Department. And there was some controversy about the mayor's nomination for that position. And I think to end on a high note, though it was earlier in the year, Ithaca made history by being the first city to have all of its Starbucks unionized fully. And then we saw the closure of one of those stores in our own backyard, Theresa, in College Town. And we spent many, many days on those picket lines, even going so far as to call on the NLRB to get involved and identify this union busting, which they did. So hoping to end that on a high note with many more for this coming 2023.
So let's look to the coming year. And I think, again, the year starts out with a few, you might say, personnel changes in city government.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've got a bit of a reputation now of having rather eventful January meetings here in Ithaca Common Council. In similar fashion, the current mayor, Laura Lewis, announced that she will not be seeking re-election to her position. And though she has not made it clear if she will be running for Common Council or future aspirations to the county or assembly, that's not yet been made clear. But what we do know is that she will not be running, but who is running is WFP endorsed Ward 5 alderperson and chair of our city administration, Robert Cantelmo, a very strong progressive with a lot of accomplishments under his belt, such as the passage of an abortion sanctuary measure and pay transparency throughout the city. And so far, he's the only candidate for mayor. But that meeting wasn't just about the election. We talked about some other things of note as well, including the passage of a piece of legislation I was very proud to support, the labor liaison position, which was authored by Alderperson McGonigal with the help of Alderperson Hiltomo, to create a Alderperson liaison to oversee negotiations between the union and the city negotiating staff, so that Common Council can be kept more thoroughly in the loop about what is transpiring, and hopefully we can avoid any catastrophes as we experienced late last year, and that we can have better transparency and communications with our city staff.
Regular communications rather than everything all at once.
Right.
But actually, it's funny, when I asked about personnel changes, I wasn't so much thinking of the mayor, where it doesn't seem like such a big difference that the person who was acting mayor becomes mayor, elected mayor. But there have been personnel changes, have been or will be personnel changes right on Common Council.
That's right.
Right now.
Yeah. In the fourth ward, Tiffany Kumar joined us in Common Council, and I have a new partner in crime in College Town, a fellow progressive who ran a very good election last year, and unseated incumbent Patrick Mailer, who was filling the vacancy for Alderperson Smith, who resigned in the midst of his term. And I'm looking forward to working with her on a lot of issues pertaining to housing and labor in the coming years. And so I think we're going to make a good pair. I'm looking forward to that. And we still have a big question mark on who is going to be taking the current mayor's former Ward 5 seat, as a vacancy committee has been meeting to talk about with a number of applicants who have applied to be the alderperson for Ward 5 for this coming year, while the races are underway in the background. But we have yet to get a definite answer on who that committee has advanced.
Yeah, it's interesting that the city of Ithaca, I suppose, according to its charter, replaces members of its legislature, its Common Council, through an committee and appointment process, whereas in contrast, the county legislature replaces
special election.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because this sort of appointment via committee is going the way of the dodo, it seems, as Alderperson Caltomo has put forth legislation in our city administration committee this past meeting in December to talk about replacing the process for which vacancies are filled with a special election, adopting the county's model for Common Council. So it seems that this fifth ward vacancy appointment will be the last of its nature.
Interesting. Didn't know that. And I guess we can turn from the personnel now to the questions, the issues.
Absolutely.
And perhaps pick one and start out. What'll be hot next year?
Right. Well, I think
in the coming year. I'm sorry.
Right. The city is really focused on trying to come up together with a policy with the county on how we deal with the homeless encampments. The popular consensus, I wouldn't say consensus, a popular policy that has been put forth by a number of folks with a lot of controversy and criticisms in the public, the Tides proposal for creating a sanctioned encampment site and prohibiting camping elsewhere throughout the city for the homeless population. Progressives have been very critical of this, as it seems to do a lot of criminalizing of homelessness, as we've seen in other cities, and create challenges for trying to really find adequate housing for people who are homeless, which is, as we all know, their only real solution to dealing with a homelessness crisis. But luckily, our amazing friends in the Human Services Coalition and the Continuum of Care have put together a plan known as Home Together Tompkins, which many progressives, such as myself, are very excited about, which will actually solve the housing crisis by building housing and trying to get homeless folks into permanent supportive housing that is affordable and that has social workers and caseworkers to help them transition into lived housing. But it very much believes in a housing first model, where we don't need to get people ready for housing. We just need to house them and support them while they are there. So I'm going to be championing that for this coming year as we discuss the housing homeless populations in the coming months as one instance. But there are many other issues that I can get into afterwards.
Yeah. Well, I think it's very good that they say that they will build housing. And I've watched the presentation. What's not clear to me is exactly how they will finance that.
Right. Yeah, no.
Because,
Okay.
yeah, I was going to say, I mean, homelessness is you might say, the most obvious symptom, shall we call it, result of the housing crisis.
Right.
But another one is that lots and lots of people who don't need supported housing, they just need affordable housing that, that they could pay for with no more than a third of their wages.
Right.
But they don't find it in the city. They are forced to move out and out and out and further out. And so they drive, which is not exactly a green practice.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think when we talk about, we all agree that a lot of us agree that we need more housing. The problem gets into housing for who? We can't just build for the sake of building. We need to build with people in mind, build with low income working class people in mind, build with people who are struggling with addiction and mental health issues in mind. And so I think Ithaca has had a difficult past and present with building for the sake of building and not having these people in mind. And that if we want to get serious about battling the housing crisis and battling its subsequent symptoms like homelessness, we need to do away with this build for the sake of building model and build with people in mind. And so I'm looking forward to working with the Human Services Coalition, the Continuum of Care, to seek grants, to pay for caseworkers, and to prioritize and earmark housing that's already in the pipeline for a lot of Ithaca, and earmark it and prioritize it for homeless populations and people who are struggling with addictions. We also need to get serious about building more shelter beds, and specifically low barrier shelter beds. Many people don't know that a lot of DSSS certified shelters garnish about 75% of your wages. They have sobriety requirements. And if you are on any type of registry, you are banned from there. And while this is sort of ideally what we would sort of want, a lot of people would want from shelters, it doesn't deal with the reality of this. A lot of people who are homeless are dealing with mental health issues, are dealing with sobriety issues, with criminal pasts. And if you don't want homelessness, we need to get serious about how we're going to solve that. And right now, our reality means we need low barrier shelters that can accommodate these people while we find and build that housing for them.
And since I have also been a city activist, and especially in the area of housing, I will just spurt out a very technical term. You said build for the sake of building, and I think technically that's called CTAP.
Yes, it's a CTAP, our common cause against, if you will, Theresa. There has been a great deal of tax abatements given to luxury development throughout the city. That means your taxpayer dollars paying for these big buildings or these big skyscrapers with $2,000 apartment units that nobody can afford. The student agency building comes to mind in our neck of the woods, Theresa. But there are so many buildings throughout, so many projects throughout the city that receive tax incentives to come here where they don't pay a nickel in taxes for about 10 years. And that's the type of building that we are trying to attract right now. Meanwhile, we have multiple encampments of homeless people who can't find a place to live. That to me signals an issue of priorities.
And as I said, also huge numbers of people commuting from way far away,
That's right.
often driving through dangerous snow and ice to get to their city jobs in a city where they might want to live but can't live.
Absolutely.
Okay, and we got a little bit into, I mean, I sort of brought up the very ungreen, you might say, edge of the housing problem, but there are, I think, far more questions about a supposed Green New Deal.
Absolutely. One of the big things that did happen last year that we didn't mention earlier was the resignation of our sustainability director, Luis Aguirre Torres, Dr. Aguirre Torres. He left amidst concerns of discrimination and harassment in the workplace, an issue that I will be exploring further and not letting fall to the wayside during this year of Common Council. It's a big loss for the city, no doubt. To say that Dr. Aguirre Torres was overqualified for the position of sustainability director here in Ithaca would be an understatement, frankly. And so we are now trying to put together the pieces and carry on in his absence. But luckily, we have amazing people like Rebecca Evans in the sustainability office who have been doing tremendous work on the Ithaca Green New Deal. But we cannot take that for granted. There's going to be a lot of issues regarding building electrification, carbon retrofitting. I believe talks of even a solar farm potentially for the city of Ithaca. All that we need to address the climate change issues that we're facing here. I don't know if you all recalled, but our December was a rather hot one. And I'm sure we all recall about a summer or two ago, the sort of monsoon season that we were all enjoying. So climate change is here. We're not in any issue of we need to stop climate change before it gets here. It's here. We need to mitigate the damage. And we're going to live with those impacts if we don't, and those consequences. And so when we do this, we have to keep in mind the marginalized communities who are on the forefront lines of climate change. We can't do what is commonly known as greenwashing, where we do a lot of capitalist ventures in the name of climate resilience. We need to be, I'm very happy that the Sustainability Office is pushing forward initiatives like Justice 50, which will state that 50% or more of climate funds will go towards climate change communities. Because these are the communities that often get left with the crumbs when it comes to big initiatives like this. So they need to be at the front of the line because they're going to be dealing with the forefront of these consequences. Their apartments are going to be the ones that are flooding. They're going to be the ones who can't commute to work because the buses don't work or the ice or the roads are iced over. So we need to make sure that the people who make our city what it is are protected from the climate catastrophe. And I'm looking forward to working with the Sustainability Office this year to make that happen.
Yeah, you mentioned buses, and I think there are some questions around buses.
I'm sure. So yes, as you know, Theresa, both of us in Ithaca DSA were part of the Free Cat campaign last year, Ithaca DSA's priority campaign. And it seems to be that we are going to be continuing this fight this coming year. Because we believe that public transit is a human right, that we deserve free fares and adequate, fully expanded and funded services for buses, and that the multi-billion-dollar elephant in the room, Cornell University, should be paying for it. Because right now they're doing the opposite. They've mentioned that they're going to withhold payments to the TCAT board, even though they're one of the three major funders of it. Until the TCAP board's funds are exhausted, they say. This is clearly a good faith partner in business. I'm sure we all would agree. But we need to be serious about this. Those of us on the Common Council and the county legislature and in the public, whether you work at Cornell, you study there, or you live in its shadow like many of us do, we need to bring them to the table and tell them to pay their fair share. You know, I've encountered many people who say that Cornell does so much for the community. They're a job creator. they bring so much money. Ithaca wouldn't be what it is without Cornell. Well, I'll tell you this. Ithaca wouldn't be anything without the people who drive our buses. It wouldn't be anything without the people who give us medicine, prescriptions, who defend us in court, who teach our children. And guess what? They all pay their fair share in the form of taxes. Cornell, nothing in taxes. It's time to bring them to the table and have them pay their fair share. And they could start with fully funding our TCAT services.
Well, I'll only take issue with your referring to them as an elephant. I often refer to them as a bear.
Couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more.
Well, this is, I mean, the issue of Cornell's tax exemption, and actually it does pay a certain payment in lieu of taxes,
right?
Which I understand is up for renegotiation in the coming year.
That it is, and I think they need to be very serious about who they're dealing with. I think Cornell has benefited from a council that has been predominantly white and wealthy, and with not a lot of material interest or stake in dealing with them as a serious partner, as opposed to an enabler, if you will. And I think this coming council, with myself on it and many others, are perhaps the most serious about our public service as a service and not as a social exercise. And with that in mind, we are going to be taking negotiations very seriously. And we expect the same from them, and we expect them to be realistic and to be serious about what they owe the city that holds their university.
Right. And you were talking about the class makeup of council, but another interesting or questionable interesting feature is how many are present or recent employees of Cornell.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And perhaps also have a certain sense that their next promotion may depend on how they vote.
Absolutely. I think I'm a recent alumni of Cornell University, as and Tiffany, I believe, is either a senior or a rising senior, and Robert Cantomo works with them in some shape or form.
Both he is both an employee and a graduate student, I believe.
That's right, or I believe a former graduate student. I'm not entirely certain, but one of the two. I think I like to say that Cornell has a bad habit of producing its biggest critics. I think that I don't believe the public should be under any suspicions that my former tenure as an undergraduate is going to influence how I will be responding to relationships with Cornell. And I have a lot of faith in my colleagues that their ties to Cornell will not define how they are ready to come to the table when it comes to delivering for our constituents. And I think, as I mentioned before, we need to be serious that we are public servants and that our duty to the public comes first. It comes before our careers. It comes before any of our comforts. And so that's how I view this. And I believe that's how many of my colleagues view it. And so I'm looking forward to hopefully realigning the city's relationship with the university.
Well, certainly, I mean, memory, their biggest foe as a mayor in the past was an alumnus of the, with a Cornell undergraduate degree and a retired professor.
As I mentioned, their biggest critics, they have a bad habit of producing.
Okay. And circling around back to housing questions, there's apparent, you earlier talked about a measure that was, not just the question of building new housing, which is essential, but of keeping people in the housing they're in already.
Absolutely. Yes, I think that a lot of folks make the answer is not which one. It's both. We need to build more affordable, accessible housing, and we need to make sure that we can keep people in their housing. And so that's why I'm a big supporter of plans like Home Together Tompkins, which will prioritize and make sure that we have the housing that we need for the homeless population. And I'm a big proponent of things like good cause eviction, commonly here known as the right to renew leases, which will state that if you are a tenant who has abided by your lease, who has not broken the law, you are entitled to have an opportunity to renew your lease. Because one of the biggest problems of the housing crisis has been housing instability and housing insecurity. You don't know if you're going to be where you last were this past year at the end of your lease. And while discrimination in the housing market is technically outlawed, there are ways around that through deciding I'm not going to renew my lease to my tenant because they're Puerto Rican, or because they're LGBTQIA, or I really just don't like how they look at me. They make too many calls or requests for repairs or maintenance. That is a protection and a power that the landlord lobby has enjoyed for quite some time now. And all that good cause eviction does is level the playing field, or begin to level the playing field between tenants and their landlords. And while many folks, including the city's current attorney and mayor, have bemoaned preemption, that this is an issue for the state assembly and Senate to deal with, I say preemption be damned. I wasn't elected to wait for someone in Albany to tell me to do my job. My district is 95% tenants in a city that is 75% tenants. And it's time that it governs that way and not governs at the behest of Albany or at the behest of the real estate lobby.
And I should just, again, to me, right to renew is a pretty clear way to refer to this kind of legislation.
Absolutely.
The other way always seems to me a little backwards. Just cause eviction. It really means no eviction without just cause.
That's right.
Well, we have covered a bunch of important matters.
That we have. And we've only scratched the surface in my mind.
Right.
There's so much to come this year.
There are more. But it's only the beginning of the year, so there will be plenty of time for plenty of struggle. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jorge DeFendini, for giving us a sense of what the questions will be before the city next year.
Absolutely. Always love to come on.
This has been Ithaca DSA Presents. I'm Theresa Alt. Thanks for watching.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3.